everybody again to one of our weekly NHS Talks. We have a special NHS Talks stories today. I am Drake Barakis, Chairman of NHS, and joining us is one of our generation's most gifted and celebrated chefs, Diane Kochilas. Diane, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Diane, as well as being a celebrity chef, appearing on numerous television programs, is also a cookbook author, and she'll talk a little bit about that. Diane was born and raised in New York in the Queens district and attended NYU. And I think it seems like one of her obviously biggest influences was her dad, who also was a chef from Icaria. And so that, I think, was the impetus for her to get involved in cooking and so forth. And she's also currently a consulting chef at numerous restaurants as well as universities. She's been a food columnist, a restaurant critic on including many publications here and abroad in Greece. And it's really an honor and a pleasure to have her with us. And of course, our great relationship with her through the NHS. She's got a great program over the past few years that's developed on public television station across the country and beyond, called My Greek Table, which the NHS is a proud partner of. And we have been working closely with Diane. She's done obviously a wonderful job explaining not only about Greek cuisine and the food and drinks, but culture and how everything ties in together. And so I think it's an honor to have her and hear her story today. So before we begin, we'll segue to a little clip of a little promotional video to show you.
I was born in New York and visited Greece when I was 12. I fell in love with the place. I moved to Athens 25 years ago to cook and write about Greece's healthy foods and natural beauty. I'm Diane Kochilas. Yassas.
My Greek Table with Diane Kochilas is made possible in part by the National Hellenic Society.
I'm on the Centaur's footpath in Mount Pelion, home to those wise mythical creatures, half man, half horse. Densely forested Mount Pelion is where the fabled centaurs roamed. I'll take the old steam engine locomotive up the mountain to visit some of its most storied villages.
Το κάθε τι έχει το μυστικό του και το κόλπο του. Βέβαια, γι' αυτό οι συνταγές αυτές είναι από τις γιαγιάδες μας.
Today I'm exploring some common culinary threads that characterize the Dodekanis, the island group in the southeastern Aegean. I'll make dolmades from Rhodes, stuffed with bulgur and spiced with cumin.
They look gorgeous.
I'm in Lefkada today, the most accessible of the Aptanissa, or 7 islands of the Ionian Sea. I'll meet 2 home cooks who will share some of their favorite local dishes.
And tell you.
And learn a quick and easy lentil soup recipe.
I'm at the Argentico, one of the most famous and historically important estates on the island of Chios, in the town of Campos. In many ways, this place represents exactly what Chios is all about: wealth, power, lushness, natural beauty, and incredible agriculture. But not only around the table, also in the glass. Cheers.
Today on the island, I'll be exploring one of Greece's most unusual distilled beverages, souma.
Salud.
Salute.
I'm on the ferry heading to Paros, one of the most popular islands of the Kyklades, to meet a young farmer who works the land in an environmentally sound way. He'll show me how his crops thrive with next to no water.
If a crop really has to dig down deep to form its roots, you will end up with a more resilient crop.
Beautiful. That's exactly the sound we want. I'm in Corfu Town, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and capital of an island truly unlike any other, with its beautifully preserved Venetian architecture and its rich history, filled with Italian, English, French, and Russian influences.
We put plenty of parsley.
I'll cook sofrito with one of the island's best-known local cooks.
Everything is covered.
And in the kitchen, I'll make tsigarelli, braised greens with tomato and feta. I'm in Evia today, the second largest Greek island, yet one of the least touristy. Evia has everything, from snow-capped mountains to famed hot springs, amazing olives, great seafood, wild mushrooms, and so much more.
I want you to taste it.
I will taste it gladly.
On the island, we'll make mushroom kritharoto with orzo.
This should be enough for the 3 of us, don't you think?
Oh,
Today I'm on the southwestern tip of the Peloponnese in Messenia, one of the most historic and bountiful places to live in Greece.
Mwah, mwah.
I'm sharing a meal full of local flavors with an old friend.
The Greek mother in me is saying, Peter, you're not eating.
And I'll visit the home of two Messinian cooks who will show me how to make a local pork dish.
Che mi dici, Telia?
In the kitchen, I'll make a comforting chicken noodle soup.
This is the taste of every Greek home.
Welcome to beautiful Naxos.
I'm on a journey to Naxos today, helping a friend rediscover his roots. The largest and greenest of the Kochilas Islands, and definitely one of the tastiest. Today, I'm in the northeastern part of the Peloponnese, one of the richest agricultural areas in all of Greece. It's known for its amazing citrus fruits, its world-class wines, olives, and some of the best pork dishes I've ever tasted. Links and information about my Greek table, visit my website, DianeKochilas.com.
Diane's cookbooks, My Greek Table and Ikaria, are available to purchase online at DianeKochilas.com or call the phone number on the screen.
I want to go to Greece. Anybody else raise their hand? Maria? Hi, Diane.
How are you? That's the whole point.
And you've done so much. We'll get into that. My name's Art Demopoulos. I'm executive director of the National Hellenic Society, and I'm joined by Maria Kosmakos, our executive assistant. And today we're going to sort of lead the discussion with Diane, a good friend to the NHS, somebody we know and love and acknowledge for all that she's done for Greece. Not just about recipes, but the Cuisina is the place where our families get together, where we argue and share love and a great meal and with friends and family, and it's so much more, so important in our heritage and culture. And it's just you are a true ambassador of that culinary legacy, and your show is so important for bringing so many of the charisma that Greece has to light. So thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
I just want to kick it off and just go into a little bit about your background, where you grew up, where your parents were from, where they immigrated, Papuya, a little bit about your background.
Is right here in this little environment that you see in the back. I'm in my village on the island of Ikaria.
What village?
Agios Dimitrios in Raches, which is we like to call it the Wild West for various reasons. My dad came from the island of Ikaria. He left Greece in 1938, but ended up in New York. It was at the Normandy landing by some various twists of fate, and ended up back in the States after the war, married my mom, found my mom through my grandfather at the Ikariotico Cafenio, the Icarian coffee shop on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And he was, my grandfather was bemoaning the fact that he couldn't die peacefully without marrying off his old daughter, who was, 30 or something at the time. And so kind of like sight unseen, my father said, oh, well, I'll marry her, whatever. But they ended up loving each other very much. And I came to Greece the first time in 1972. I was a young girl, and came to my family village. My mom also, half of my mom's family is from Ikaria, and the other half is actually from Calabria. So a little bit of Italian in there. And I came in 72 and absolutely fell in love with the place. Not speaking a word of Greek, but totally understanding the spirit of freedom.
So no Greek school when you were in
I went to Greek school, but we spoke English at home, and I was always the disruptive kid in the class. I was always the kid who got an N in conduct. So, the kid who would throw the book across the room and the teacher's wig would come off, that kind of thing. So I actually learned Greek when I moved here as a young adult in the early 80s, just by immersing myself in it.
Diane, did they have a rough time during World War II? And with the Antarctico too, or was it?
In Icaria.
Yeah. I think
Everyone in Icaria is an Andarte. I don't think you want to go there. But
no, but with the Germans, was it?
No, the Germans weren't on Icaria. The Italians were.
Oh, okay.
So it was a little bit calmer.
Yeah.
But Icaria, since 1,000 years of history in Icaria, has been a history of exile. It's in its own way, it's a very interesting place because it's never had any historical significance.
Yeah.
It's always been very poor. It doesn't have any natural ports. It was never important on any trade routes. So it was always kind of forgotten. But it was also a place of exile. So that mostly because it was difficult to get off the island. The island is surrounded by very, very rough water.
Yeah.
The Icarian Pelagos, the Icarian Sea, it's open sea. So up until essentially the late 50s, it was, Mikis Theodorakis was exiled here. Several prominent politicians were exiled here in the 20th century. So the island there's a very interesting local culture that evolved in this isolation. And Icaria is a blue zone.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know what that is, it's one of the 5 or 6 places on the planet that have been studied because of their longevity statistics. The term actually comes from drawing a blue circle around these places, and the person who coined it is just a marketing genius, a guy named Dan Buettner, and found Icaria to be one of the blue zones. And when it was first discovered, I also started to think about my own family. My mom lived to be 95. My husband's family, his grandmother lived to be 99. My father-in-law, in his 90s, and lots of other people who I knew who were related to me lived not only into their 90s, but lived well and with all of their cognitive abilities intact and still active and still part of a community. So this, the isolation on the island is interesting because I think what ended up happening, maybe by chance, is that people developed this very strong sense of solidarity and independence.
Yeah.
And the women are very strong in Icaria. The men have the dowries.
The women out of the neck, right?
Right. So, very different, from a patrician conservative Greek America. How else can I put it?
So I know that, from Buettner, and one year we had Dr. Arkel Georgiou, who is the physician,
right,
American, attending to, staying there for 6 months, and they,
right,
why are people living so long, and more importantly, with all their senses, it's very low dementia rates and other rates, and diet played a huge role, and then they said exercise, stress, and then what was really interesting was, this feeling of community. That when there's a baptism, we celebrate together. When there's a death, we cry together. So it's this wholeness that we lack.
The spirit of community runs very deep on Icaria. It also runs very deep within the Icarian community outside of Icaria. So when I was growing up, for example, we have friends that our friendships span generations. So my kids are friends with the kids of my friends, and I'm friends with the kids of my parents' friends, and it kind of goes on like that.
Yeah.
And that's a really beautiful thing because you have a very strong sense of belonging someplace. It's very soothing to have that, especially in a society as mobile as the United States, where people move all over the place all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
But here, when I was growing up in New York, there was a really strong Icarian community in Elmhurst and Jackson Heights, Queens, and that was all I knew. I didn't even realize there were people from other places on Earth when I was a young child. And then when we were teenagers, we were all part of the Icarian Brotherhood of America, and we would get on buses and go to Detroit, for a dance. it was just, that was our normal.
And
was
your
great.
dad was a chef? I didn't know that.
My dad was a chef and
Yeah.
dabbled a little bit in the restaurant business. But he worked on boats most of his life.
Uh-huh.
So it was a real islander's existence.
Yeah.
Strong mom and absentee dad.
So what was growing up Greek American like for you in New York?
Growing up Greek American was, we all know what that means, right? It's a really strong, you have a very strong sense of roots, very solid values. You have a sense that there is an extended community. The food is a really important part of that. Because, when I was a kid, my dad, toward the end of his life, had been ill, so he was home a lot when I was a kid. He traveled a lot too, up until maybe I was 6 or 7. But we had dinner every single night together. That was just an absolute rule. This was New York in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Of course, no cell phones, nothing like that, of course, but a lot more freedom in some ways. As long as we were home by dinner time, it didn't, we were out all day playing on the street, bicycling, whatever. But growing up Greek American, I'm also the product of Greek parochial schools.
Yeah.
And I have to say that my oldest friends are friends that I know from those schools.
So when I say trio bel canto, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
I do.
Dating myself, right?
But it's, Greeks are look, there are two kinds of people in the world. The Greeks and the ones who want to be Greek.
Maria?
So what were your college years like? And tell us a little bit about your family. What brought you back to Greece?
I'm the youngest of 3 sisters. And my dad passed away when I was a kid, so we were all women in the house. I went to NYU. It was a different time. It was easier in many ways, more difficult in other ways. New York was a mess in the 70s. I went to NYU. When I graduated, I had been coming to Greece in the summers. The first time I came was in 1972. It was the only time that the Panicarian Brotherhood of America had their annual convention in Ikaria. Usually it's in some other place in the United States over Labor Day weekend. Usually places where Icarians settled. So, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Philadelphia, also New York, all sorts of places. But it was the first and only time that it was actually on the island. So I remember as a kid, the ferry boat seemed to me, kind of like the Queen Elizabeth. I had never seen anything like that. And coming to the island, it was a total backwater. There was nothing here. And it was the most amazing experience of my life. It definitely shaped me. I've always been, kind of an ungovernable wild card ever since. Once you get a taste of that kind of spiritual freedom, it's very hard to shackle yourself, to an office job.
Yeah. So let's talk about the cooking bug. When did you first, what was your, I presume your major was something other than.
My major was French literature and journalism.
Okay.
Two majors.
The humanities,
I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to write. I had always written, even as a kid.
Uh-huh.
And when I studied journalism, because also I grew up, we were the Watergate generation. So we all wanted to be investigative journal. The ones who studied journalism all wanted to be Bob Woodward. And I had a totally different life plan. I was going to go out someplace to the Midwest. I had this vision. I'd get on a Greyhound bus, go to the Midwest, get a job at some small newspaper, and kind of figure it out. But Instead, I ended up working for a guy named Steve Brill, who started, you should know him, he started the American Lawyer magazine. And it was actually a really interesting time. There were a lot of amazing people at that magazine then. James Stewart, who went on to win a Pulitzer Prize, he writes for the Wall Street Journal. Jill Abrams, who was executive editor of the New York Times. We were, you know, people much more from much more, you know, prestigious schools than I had come from. But I worked there for, I don't know, 2 years. And at some point I had this revelation that, oh my God, this is going to be my life. I'm going to be in some office and have 2 weeks vacation and have to beg for it. Absolutely not. I'm going to Greece. And I was 22 when I did that. And I worked here. There was this great magazine called The Athenian. I don't know if you remember that. It was modeled after The New Yorker.
Yeah.
And it was started by a guy named Sloane Eliot III and his wife Drosula, who was the daughter of a very famous Greek painter.
Oh, wow.
Vassiliou. And it was a wonderful magazine. It had been around for a very, very long time. And you know, I was working, I was always writing. I mean, I was always doing that. And then I got married and came back to the States and got a job again in editorial and ended up editing I mean, it's sort of like chance, right?
Right.
That's what we teach our kids, that there's value in serendipity. So I don't want to talk about my boring life. I want to talk about the messages, the lessons, because there's value in serendipity. We can't plan anything. Isn't that what all of this is about? Isn't this some message from the universe that says, you know, COVID is upon us. Don't plan. Man plans, God laughs. Leave yourself open to what the universe has to give you.
And where did food come in? I mean, where did the light bulb just go off and say, you know, I'm going to do this?
No, food came in because I grew up in a Greek home, so
Right.
food was always really important. But then in one of my first jobs, I was editing the food column. It was written by a well-known food writer at the time, a guy named John Mariani, who took me under his wing. And it was, you know, I was in my very early 20s. It was still the time of like martini lunches, and, you know, we'd go to Petrosian for press lunches and have mountains of caviar. It was so decadent and extravagant and delicious. And at some point, I realized that there hadn't been a book about Greek food written in English in America for at least 10 years.
Wow.
And I was probably in my mid to late 20s at the time. And John introduced me to his agent. I wrote a proposal. And it took about a year to sell the book because I was, you know, totally unknown. And I think I got a $5,000 advance. And my husband is an artist, and he also sold a painting at the time. So we came to Greece, and I literally taught myself how to cook writing this book. I'm not embarrassed to say it. I had no idea what I was doing. I kind of was going around, you know, I got this crazy job doing market research for Siba Gaigi, going to these agricultural villages in Greece and going into these stores, asking people about some product that they were trying to market. But I used that opportunity to find farmers and their, you know, wives and relatives and ask them about their food. And that's when I started to realize that, wow, there's a lot more than Ikaria, you know, in this country. And, you know, Greece is an incredibly diverse place. It's, you know, even geographically, it's always been a crossroads between the East and the West. So it's, you know, once you start to dig beneath the surface a little bit, what you discover is that the food is a mirror of the complexities of Greek culture. And you find, you know, incredible influences where you least expect them. For example, there's a dish that I came across when I wrote a book called The Glorious Foods of Greece, which took me 8 years to finish researching. I spent a lot of time in the Gennadius library, reading all sorts of things from, you know, old newspaper recipes and old regional newspapers to, you know, the travel writings of 17th and 18th century Europeans, because they also documented the food.
But I remember coming across a recipe in villages. This recipe is from the villages above Sparta, Tavor-de-Nohoria. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I'm not.
But they were settled by Christianized Albanians, 500 years ago. And I found a recipe called Albanian chicken, which is also sometimes called kotopoulo barouniotico, because Greeks are, chauvinists, of course, so nobody wants to name their national dish, with another nationality. So, but, it's just really interesting. And it's just an incredibly complex place. And, because it also is an agricultural country, it still is an agricultural economy.
Yeah.
What you find when you start to scratch beneath the surface is really the whole history of Greece. You find Byzantine, dishes, you find ancient influences in the cuisine. I mean, just think about the 5 or 6 ingredients that are totally, the sort of the poster boys for Greek food, right? Olive oil, olives, honey, certain grains, grapes, fish, there are many more than 5. And those are all things that have had an unbroken continuum of consumption and application, since before written history.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One of the most interesting experiences for me was thanks to you, Art, when you called me to come down to the Agora, the ancient Agora, and I met John Camp, and then went back and did that.
Who's watching? Who's watching?
Is he? Okay.
Hello to John.
I went back and, we did that wonderful episode together. And my only regret was that it wasn't a 5-hour show. It was just so fascinating to see how nothing has changed, and yet everything has changed.
Right. Right.
So, quick question, going back to cookbooks, do you have a favorite cookbook? And do you have a favorite role model chef that you look up to?
I think if I have a favorite cookbook, I think it's The Glorious Foods of Greece, because even though it's not in print anymore, it was one of the loves of my life. I totally bit off more than I could chew. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had a 2-year contract to finish the book, and I was also a young mother, so when I came to Greece, my kids were born here. I started this book. My daughter traveled everywhere with me, literally either in a kangaroo pack or in a backpack. We took some amazing trips together for, the first 5 or 6 years of her life. And and that book really, there's a wonderful word in Greek called patridognosia, which means, knowledge of your country, learning about your country. And for me, that's exactly what that book was, because I traveled to many, many different places. And one of the things you realize in Greece, and I think this is still definitely true, especially in smaller places, is that there is this incredible generosity of spirit among Greeks. So when you're in a village, people will never share a recipe. They'll never give you a recipe. They'll share the finished dish, with great generosity, waiting for that, compliment at the end of it. And when you ask them how they made it, they always leave something out. Very rarely will somebody give you a complete recipe. And sometimes I don't think it's malice. I just think it's one of the few sources of power that women had in traditional homes in Greece. So giving that away would be diluting that power to some extent. And it was also, food was the way that women kept the family together. Sunday meals are still, they've kind of fallen by the wayside, but up until maybe 10 years ago, they were still fairly rigorous, part of everyone's week. But what I learned during that book was how complex the history is here, because food unfortunately is often bypassed as some sort of, secondary area of study or secondary it's not important. It's the most important thing we do. It's one of the 3 things we have to do on Earth in order to survive. Maybe 4 if you count paying taxes. But, and yes, Greeks pay their taxes. But it's absolutely necessary to survival. Of course, I'm stating the obvious, but how people cope with the survival mechanism in cooking is really fascinating, especially in a country like Greece, which is very rich agriculturally. And I've had this conversation with a lot of friends who are from Northern Europe, and especially at the height of the financial crisis in Greece, where the Northern Europeans were very arrogant and kind of quick to label Greeks in certain ways. But I think there's a vast cultural difference, and that difference, to my mind, is that in Northern Europe, people always had to struggle for food, and that made them much more aware of, much more fearful in some things. Whereas in the Mediterranean, especially in the southern Mediterranean, food was always readily available. I mean, one of the most interesting experiences I ever had here in Ikaria, in one spring, maybe about 8 or 10 years ago, I had a cooking group here. I do these cooking groups in the spring, summer, and fall on the island, mostly Americans, not exclusively, but for the most part, my guests are American. And one year, it was early spring, and I called a friend over who knows all of the greens and herbs, the wild stuff. And I said, come over, I want you to show us, just the variety, because I really didn't know, I only knew sort of the 5 or 6 basic things that are easily recognizable. And she came over and she was complaining the whole time that it hadn't rained all winter and there was nothing available and she couldn't pick anything. Literally within 100 feet of my front door here in Ikaria, she must have picked 45 different edible weeds.
Wow.
And, most of them, not only with their flavor profile, but also with their pharmaceutical, their therapeutic value. She knew that's a knowledge that's passed on from generation to generation. It's a living tradition.
Yeah.
So, getting back to the whole idea of food in Greece, it's a mirror of Greek history. I mean, what we eat is a mirror of who we are. And, I think that's certainly true. It's true everywhere. I think, unfortunately, that's also true in the United States. But in Greece, there's just an incredibly rich flora, and people are still very much in tune with that.
I remember, Diane, Artemis Simopoulos. She's a physician and one of the, shall we say, godmothers of the omega diet and all the research. And she was on the panel that we had with Dr. Yorgio about the Korean diet. And she had mentioned, I had no idea, basically, chickens are grazers, and they eat, a lot of the vota now, or what you described, of these herbs, and she was saying that both their meat and their eggs, the omega levels are through the roof, and there's no comparison to the Tyson chickens that you and I buy at the supermarket.
No comparison.
Good for you. And then another thing she alerted me to that I really didn't think about was that meat is usually the appetizer, not the main course, And I look at, what my mother can do with eggplant and zucchini. I mean, there's so many incredible recipes that you can create with zucchini and eggplant, just those two.
I mean, the eggplant is a very interesting vegetable because until today's Hagia Sophia, right? So I posted a picture of Hagia Sophia in my newsletter today. I have people asking me, what is this beautiful building? Anyway, up until 1922, eggplants were not really a part of the Greek diet. They really came with the Greeks from Asia Minor.
I didn't know that.
So all of the, most of the really iconic dishes, moussaka,
that was something that was relatively unknown here. It was, Greek diet up until then, it was really very much a peasant diet. The more urbane dishes came with the Greeks of Anatolia. And they changed, they not only changed the diet, they changed, of course, the music, but and many other things. But even in something as simple as an eggplant, right? There's a whole history, and it's just really fascinating. I mean, it's hard to pinpoint exactly, the travels of vegetables or the travels of certain foods, through the world. But in Greece, I mean, Greece was well known. There are certain villages in Macedonia that were known for the cultivation of red peppers. They rivaled Hungary for the production of paprika peppers. A place now called Aridea, though it used to be called Karadzova under the Ottomans.
Right.
Now there's also a village called Piperia, which means pepper, not too far from Naousa in northern Greece. So I mean, there's just this incredible wealth of amazing raw ingredients here, and old, what we would call in the United States heirloom, vegetables. The wines, the same thing. I mean, the wines, winemaking was more or less, it lay dormant for 400 years. I mean, people were maybe making wine very quietly at home, but there was this incredible wealth of indigenous grape varietals, Vinus vinifera grapes that had been almost lost, and they were rediscovered. That's really interesting story. They were rediscovered they started to be rediscovered in this, I think, 70s and maybe little, 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Karas, I think it was Yanis Karas, Porto Karas, he had the largest private vineyard in Europe.
Yeah.
And he hired a young winemaker named Vangelis Gerovasiliou, who was wet behind the ears, fresh out of, Bordeaux. His professor had talked him out of pursuing a PhD because he said, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to teach or do you want to make wine? And he said, I want to make wine. I said, you don't need a PhD. Go make wine. I got a job for you. And he got him a job. And he and a few other, really visionary winemakers literally started looking at people's trellises and understanding, the clones and the grape varietals and, the shape of this fruit and the shape of that leaf. And, oh, this must be that. And a group of, very well-versed young winemakers and agronomists started to piece together this incredible roadmap of Greek grapes, many of which have histories that go back 2,000 years.
And I guess now with the uniform packaging, I mean, there's uniformity or in the production, and we're finally starting to see those. The labels are in English. They're
their wines are
see all these in the United States.
Yeah, Greek wines are amazing. I mean, they're world class. And they're very unique.
Yeah. You mentioned also, I was sort of blown away when you and I visited with John Kemp at the Agora, and he was describing and showing us. Do you remember? He said that when the Persians had sacked Athens, they destroyed all the homes and took everything and just threw them down wells. And for an archaeologist, that's like a gold mine, right? And they uncovered everything, and it was all the different pots and pans. And if you recall, John's like, well, the professor that wrote the book on these ancient where is cookware happens to be, or would you like to see her? Was like, yes.
From Cincinnati, right?
Right, from Cincinnati. Yeah. And it was just, the George Foreman cooking stove and the hibachi were invented like thousands of years ago. And it was just amazing to see all the different pots and pans and cooking utensils.
But they're all the same. Only the technology has changed.
That's it. Yeah, that's his big line.
So
Take us
John's
through
watching. I'm a good student. I remember every single word you said to me, Dr. Camp.
So take us through how you write a cookbook, your sort of style, because it's, people just assume it's easy, but it's not.
How do you write a cookbook?
Yeah. How do you do it? What's your
You
process?
sign a contract, and the next day you say, "Oh my God, oh my God, I have to actually cook and test 300 recipes." I always did research in the field. I'm sort of self-taught, so I am self-taught. I never went to cooking school, and I mean, I usually travel and go to markets and find people who are local and ask them about what they cook. And I mean, I haven't done that actually in a while, but the earlier books, that's basically how I did them. And, Greece was also a very different place, but, if women, I mean, people will talk to you. The Greeks are sociable, they talk. I mean, once I was researching the glorious foods of Greece, and I was traveling in Crete by myself. Wintertime, it was pouring rain. It was maybe the middle or end of November. And I remember driving over, from the northern to the southern part of Crete, ending up in Sfakia. And I walked into some cafenio. And I mean, it was like out of central casting. There literally there was no one but men were out. And they were all dressed in black. Half of them had these heavy duty leather boots and the headscarves, whatever. And I walk in, and every single head in this cafe turned to see who this crazy, woman is. And, I said, Yasas, I'm looking for recipes. I'm here, I'm doing this book, blah, blah, blah. I'm Greek American. And I actually ended up spending maybe 3 or 4 days there, because each of them sent me to their aunts, their mothers, their godmothers, their grandmothers, And it was incredible. So a lot of just research like that, in the field, writing obviously taking lots of notes, writing down recipes that are never imparted with accuracy, as I mentioned earlier. So kind of having tasted stuff and then going back and trying to figure it out, and working through recipes, making them also, I mean, my goal has always been I don't want any of my books to be museum pieces. I want people to cook from them. And, that's just that's my personal perspective. I think it's one thing to read about food, and it's another thing to get into your kitchen and actually try something. So I always, aimed to make even the most traditional recipes as accessible as possible. Fine, things are very different, things taste different. Vegetables are grown differently in the United States. An eggplant, the first time I, started working in restaurants, I realized that, the eggplants were as big as my newborn baby. And this was absolutely not normal. And they were filled with water. So when you cooked them, you started with something this big and you ended up with something, this big.
Wow.
So, you have to adjust things, and you make notes, and sometimes you get some nasty emails from people. And sometimes a lot of times you get great emails from people. But, I really always looked at food because for me, you asked me, what it meant to be Greek American. I mean, food was a really important part of that. And it was the glue of our culture. It's the last vestige of any culture to disappear. And I remember with that book, I was getting emails from people saying, my grandmother, I remember my yaya, she was from some village in Epirus, or maybe even in parts, what are now parts of Albania, because that was divided. And I remember she used to make this pie, and I had never found a recipe for it, and I found it in your book. And, that's really gratifying.
Yes.
So
you reminded me of a story when you said Sfakia. I was about 18, and I was going to walk the gorge of Samaria, which winds up in Sfakia.
Yeah.
So I'm on a city bus. I'm a poor student, and there's those like three of us on the bus, and the bus just stop the hotel bus. He just stops in the middle of the road, opens the window and yells out, "Tres!" And sure enough, there comes this guy running up to the bus with a tray with some cucumbers, 3 shots of cicudia and something else. I'm like, well, here's something that's never ever going to happen in the United States, but it just shows the philoxenia, the food. It was really beautiful. I mean, I never forgotten it. How beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, food is our humanity. It's a
Yeah.
manifestation of humanity. We share it. That's why Greeks have done so well in the restaurant industry, because we love to share food. We're hospitable.
Maria?
Speaking of the restaurant industry, you've been a consultant to several restaurants and institutions, right? So how do you go about doing that?
That's a lot of teamwork. And it has to be, because when you go in as an outsider, no matter what it is, whether it's a university kitchen or dining hall or a restaurant kitchen, the person who's actually executing that food every day you have to respect that. It's a really difficult job. It's very difficult to do that consistently well. So oftentimes, I would mostly come in to sort of maybe balance the menu with traditional stuff or regional food. And then it's really fun to play around in restaurant kitchens and create new dishes and work with, all sorts of people, Greeks and non-Greeks, and see how all of that comes together and figure out what sells and what doesn't sell, because not everything works, right?
And I know you're close with the Livanos family and other New York restaurants. How do you think that they're coping with everything that's going on right now?
Well, Oceana just opened.
Yay!
It's a great restaurant.
Announced that. And I have to say, I have a double special place in my heart for the Livanos family, because Nick Livanos is also, he loves my daughter, and he loves my daughter's art. And my daughter's art graces several of his restaurants. 5 amazing pieces of art in the new Oceana. But I know that, New York restaurants New York took a knock. It took a knock. I'm also doing some fun stuff with one of the Livanos sons, Johnny. Created one of the first Greek gins called Stray Dog. And he's also a wine person. He works for Diamond Importers, one of the big wine importers out of Chicago. So we're doing these online wine and food pairings. We're doing the first one this coming Sunday, which is sold out. I'm doing a lot of online stuff now, by default, because I also, the mainstay of my income, my career right now is tourism and these culinary tours. Of course, the TV show, but the food tourism is really interesting, and bringing people to Ikaria is not only about food, it's also about showing people a whole other way to experience life. Online has been a tremendous resource, so I'm doing a lot. I started a new business. I'm doing online cooking classes.
So let's just talk about, My Greek Table and how it came about.
It came about by the sheer force of will. I've been in Greece, 30 years. I've always wanted to do, I love doing TV. I did 2 years of TV in Greece, 98 episodes a season, and I really loved it. And it was the right time. My kids were grown, so I had more time. And I put together this idea and reached out. I kind of did it pretty methodically, and I found a co-producer. So we produced the show ourselves. As you know, because my half of that production equation is all the fundraising. And of course, NHS and the Baracus Foundation and the Marcus Foundation and a few other NHS members. The show really came about because it's been kind of my life's mission to share Greek culture with an American audience. And I always did it through the books. And television is an incredible vehicle for doing that. And the show's done really well. It's, we're now also on Amazon Prime.
Great.
We're in China, we're in the UK, we're in Canada, we're in Australia.
Wow.
The fourth season will be a little bit different. We just did 3 seasons of My Greek Table. We traveled, to lots of different places in Greece. And, again, it was this whole idea of food and culture, and it wasn't only about cooking and recipes. So in some places, for example, in Tinos, we did a segment on marble, and I found this incredible marble sculptor whose name is Praxitelis, if that means anything to you.
Yeah. Fittingly.
And, it was, so there's always a cultural component in every episode, and because food is culture, so it's all, it's all holistically married.
Yeah.
And the next season will be a little bit different. It'll be broader in scope. It'll be filmed in Greece, but it will be a little bit broader. I don't want to talk about the kid before it's born.
Well, my hats go off to folks like the Niarchos Foundation, and of course to George and Judy Marcus, and so many other sponsors, to Grecian Delight. Pete Parthenis is one of our members.
Of course, Grecian Delight. And
because they see the value of this, not only from a business perspective, because millions of people watch this. And again, we have Fios at home and Cox, and every now and then I'll just go on the search and just put in My Greek Table, and it's playing somewhere all the time, everywhere. I mean, so it's just a wonderful way to bring the cuisine, the goods, the wines and the feta and all the foods, and our way and tourism. Absolutely. I mean, because you watch an episode, and I guess we were watching it the other day with Artemis, my wife, and it was like, I want to go to Greece, and she's mad that we weren't able to go this year.
I mean, do you know how many messages I get from people? I never knew, I'd never heard of Volos. I definitely want to go there. I never knew about Pilio. I'm definitely going to Tinos. That's really, to me, that's exactly that we achieved what we set out to achieve, which was to showcase Greece and show a different, show a deeper side of the country, and show multifaceted aspects of Greece. And Greece is an exciting place. I mean, there are a lot of, really, Athens is an amazing city. It's an amazing city.
But where do you find like yayas and papudas, where do you find them? These like wonderful, wonderful people that they bring a little bit of how they do, how they make the paximadia, or how they make feta, or how they make different things. Where do you find them?
Honey, I'm from New York. I have chutzpah. I'm shameless and relentless.
What do you think about our cuisine and culture and the aspects of important meals that make it very special and appeal to all audiences?
I think most of the audience is actually not Greek.
Yeah.
It's, it's a public television audience, but we're also, we have a lot of live streaming, and we, that's very popular, very on demand is very popular. A lot of, now on Amazon Prime now, that's also doing really well. So the show is out there, I think it's really done a lot of good for Greece. We also Greece is the mother of the Mediterranean diet. So the food is very healthy.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier about your mother cooking vegetables, your mother cooking eggplant and zucchini. And, that the wealth of plant-based Greek dishes is just endless. So people don't think about that. They think of Greek, think of lamb and souvlaki, a few of these iconic dishes, but the wealth of vegetable cooking in Greece is tremendous. And some of it, is tied also to the fasting calendar, but it's also just the land. I mean, it's a very rich place and
The food is, the produce is really delicious. There's a lot of regional distinction from place to place. And that's essentially, what I tried, that's what we set out to do. I mean, in everything, even, I'll be a little self-promoting here, even in the e-shop that I started about a year ago, I really, I looked for these artisans who are from different parts of the country who are producing, unique, traditional, some things are really traditional, but some things are also, an evolution of tradition. So Greece is happening. It's a modern country with very deep roots.
Yeah. Frosine said, Frosine Phillips from San Francisco, who's
Hi,
executive
Frosine.
director of Helios, chimed in, and she said how her yaya brought Imam Baldi from Constantinople. And my mother grew up in modern day Istanbul or Constantinople, and she would talk about, how, it would take like 8 hours to make a certain dish. It had to be in ceramic, and they would put a layer of dough,
yes, to seal
around
it.
the rim, and then seal the dough, and that would rise, and that's how the juices, just this, this sort of science and art of cooking that was just amazing, how that gets passed down. So we're so fortunate that you're bringing those, to the forefront and to the mainstream through the show, in really neat ways.
It's a lot. I love doing it.
I know you do.
Our Facebook Live has over 53 comments. It's going crazy. Maybe you're hitting all. We love it so much.
How many people tuned in?
Yeah, and I love what you said. You're sometimes it's like, we'll put some of your recipes on there, and you'll get comments like, you don't put oranges in your kurunaka mix. That's like, or
I know I get a lot of comments.
You get outraged,
Stay with the traditional stuff. Don't do this.
So what are some of the favorite episodes of yours that on the show? It's for those of you that don't know about it. It's if you just put in My Greek Table, you can see the little logo behind Maria there. PBS, you can download or watch, the whole all three series, 13 episodes a year on there, and join it. But what are some of your favorites, or some of the favorite?
Some of my favorite episodes.
Or some of the favorite cutouts that we didn't get to see, like funny stuff. Because there were a couple episodes where you were down in some ouzos there, young lady.
The Chios episodes were a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun. I have also a lot of friends from Chios, so there was a whole other, element when we were on the island. But I think the Chios episodes are definitely some of my favorite ones.
Suma, what was the name of that drink?
Oh, Suma, my God, that is you just look at it and you get drunk. I mean, it's this fig distillation. And I will tell you a funny story. I don't know if I should say this publicly, but when we went to Chios, we had arranged the whole trip and everything. And I'm a bit of a control freak because, I have 11 people on a crew, and it's, kind of my budget, and we have to make sure that things are going to happen the way they're supposed to happen. So we get to Chios, and everything was great. We went to amazing places. It's such an incredible island. And we get to the sumo maker. I won't say where it was. And he said, "Oh, I'm not really supposed to do this legally, and I can't unlock my still." And I said, "You're joking. I have 11 people here, and we came to film you and promote your island. You're going to find a way to do that." And he did find a way to do it, after a lot of, how can I put it,
coaxing.
I unleashed my truck driver's vocabulary in Greek. And he was convinced that he had to do it, otherwise something terrible might have befallen him.
Yeah.
But but it all happened. It was all great, and then we had a wonderful time. But then I had a great, another really interesting episode was Tinos, because we met this marble sculptor there, and I had sort of come, I knew who he was. He's very
well-respected marble sculptor in Greece. And we visited him in his studio, and he told me one thing that was it was just so beautiful. He said, all of Tinos is a sculpture, and it was sculpted to provide food.
Oh, that's neat.
Because everything, all of these steps that are carved into the mountains, and and it just drove home this idea that everything's connected, and in Ikaria too, it's that's one of the lessons of life here, that the way that food ends up on the table is a combination of socializing and natural exercise and going, visiting a friend and going mushrooming and coming back and inviting other people over and cooking and community and understanding that this stuff is, very healthy. And
I loved when you went and looked for capers, on one of the
that was
islands.
so funny.
That was so neat. Yeah. So before we leave, Diane, you got to tell us the best places to eat in Athens, because
oh my God, the best place to eat in Athens is
so
my
where's the
house.
best place to get paella? What's the best taverna?
I can't do that. You know how many nasty emails I'll get from friends at restaurants?
All right, so where's some of your favorite places to go in Athens?
Some of my favorite places. All right, my favorite places may not be NHS, level places. I like the really down and dirty.
We love tavernas, man.
Okay.
You don't know us that well.
All right. I like this place called Untitled, which is off Platia Victoria.
Everybody write that down. Where is it at?
No, I'm not saying it again. I don't want to ruin the place, by sending too many people there. It's called Untitled. It's just a simple place. I like this. There's this little Cretan, tiny Cretan place in my new neighborhood. I just bought an apartment. I bought a loft in 1970s New York City, downtown Athens. So it's on Platia Avdi. There's a great restaurant under me called Kochilas. It's a really good place. God, there are too many.
There was a really neat little place in Kolonaki that a ship owner took me to that nobody knows about. And it just,
if it's in Kolonaki, everyone knows about it.
Well, yeah, I guess so. But it was just you're right, because I saw the prime minister there. But it was just this amazing place. And there's just where's some of the great places to have fish, and because there's a whole bunch of it.
Fish.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you, I feel really uncomfortable recommending specific places, but I like Vasilena's, which is across from the Hilton. I like, I'm not sure if Milos is still in Athens, but that's always classic and great.
Yeah.
I like Durambe, the classic old taverna in Piraeus. There's also one in Neopsychiko.
In Gazi, there's some amazing places there, right?
There's some amazing places in Gazi, and I like the down and dirty places the most. I like the places where the waiters are gruff and, the service is moody.
You reminded me when I was on an Olympic flight, and I got thirsty, and I said to the stewardess, I said, "Can I have a Coca-Cola?" And she went, "Bali," she was gonna have another one.
I used to smoke on those Olympic flights. I were those stewardesses with the leather skin, chain smoking.
Anyway,
and dancing in the aisles.
So I have a better idea of how to close. You've done so much. You've accomplished so much. You're an inspiration to us all. What do you want future generations to remember you for?
That's a good question.
Bringing two good people into the world, I would say, first and foremost.
Your children, yeah.
And maybe, hopefully, teaching them through books, I don't know when I'm dead if my books are still going to be in print. Probably not. Half of them aren't in print now. So, teaching Greeks about their own culture to some extent, and imparting, I guess, more than anything, I think Ikaria is we spend way too many of our waking hours forgetting that life is a gift.
Yes.
And we should not stress out about anything. You asked me before we started this whole hour, when am I going back to Athens? And I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, we need to take charge of our lives and understand what really is important, because we're only passing through.
Yeah, and I think this crisis, in many ways, if you're going to look at a silver lining, that's it. That we've gotten to spend times with our loved ones, and then we realize how much we miss people like you. You know, our friends, and just even strangers. You know, I mean, just how much we miss being together and how important that is. I think that those are some of the lessons learned. You know,
and you know, I think one of the lessons, and maybe this is in some ways, you know, an apt lesson for our time. Ikaria is a very unique place. In isolation, people learn to live together and have a very strong sense of solidarity. There was never a left-wing kafenio and a right-wing kafenio. They were all in it together.
Yeah.
And for me, the most heartbreaking thing that is happening in the world right now is that we have lost the ability to have dialogue.
Greek word.
So,
yeah.
You know,
Greek word, right?
It's a Greek word, and we've lost that ability. It's so polarized. So let's all just remember, you know, that's a life lesson. I mean, you know, you see that in families too, right? You know, the brothers and sisters don't speak together. They fought over some, you know, stupid inheritance or some apartment or some, you know, whatever.
Something, yeah.
And it's just not, you know, that's not where it's at. I mean, it's about, we're all here together.
You know, and you know, I have a lot of friends that are soldiers, you know, former soldiers, and that's what they say. When you're in a foxhole with somebody, you don't look at their skin, you don't look at their income bracket, you don't look, you know, you're there for them and they're there for you.
Yeah, we're all in this together. So you know, we have to open the dialogue again. It's crazy.
We have to make America Greek again. That's right. Anyway, well, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You're a great friend to the NHS. For those of you that don't know, one of our, you know, best programs or our signature program is our Heritage Greece program. We send 100 students. We were going to send 100 this year to Greece, Greek Americans, Greek Canadians, and hopefully it'll keep growing. And we change their lives. You know, we really do. They spend.
That's an amazing program.
You are so magnanimous, and you know, I know that, you know, part of being Greek is giving back, and you do, and you do an incredible cooking presentation for them, you know, and that they remember. So we are very grateful for that. And then we go around the country, you and I and others, you know, preaching the gospel of my Greek table and Greek food and our paradosis, our charismata, our gifts.
I miss those dog and pony shows.
I do too, and we'll do it again soon. So thank you. I wish we were there with you in Nicaria. That's a great place to quarantine.
Oh God, I'm blessed. I'm working remotely from paradise.
There you go. Well, I don't want to see it, and we look forward to season 4. So from all of us, thank you.
Thank you.
To our audience, thank you, and to our supporters, thank you. So, Micah,
have
a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Send us recipes.
I'll send you food.
All right. Even better. There's some suma, right? Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.